One for me is connection before content. It's not that the content doesn't matter. It's that without the connection, the content won't matter. Whether you've got 20 people or 2,000 people in front of you, one thing is to remember there's no such thing as an audience.
Donn King is the confidence cultivator. He is a professor of communication studies, a pastor, a speaker, a writer, and a communications coach. As an award-winning speaker and longtime writer, he's written a textbook. He's written several other specialized works. He works with professionals and leaders who want to speak confidently so they can increase their impact, gain influence, and build their careers. This is going to be a conversation around how your communication skills can help you in your business or your career, whether you're on your own or you're inside of a company or a structure. We're going to dive into the most important communication skills that you need to know in order to grow your career. If you take even just one strategy or tip or philosophy away from this conversation with Donn King, please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the best part of the Be Better team, and you've helped us to get to almost 300 episodes over the past 2 years. And for that, we are grateful. So without further ado, let's talk about how to build your career. Let's talk about how to become a better communicator and to cultivate confidence with the cultivator himself, Mr. Donn King. It's great to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good to be on here with you.
It's great to have you. And Julie Cooley introduced the two of us. And Julie is an awesome human being.
Oh, yeah.
And she's one of the most listened to episodes of the podcast about mindfulness and her story. And I'm really grateful that she introduced the two of us. So tell me, how did you come across this term, or how were you donned, no pun intended, as the confidence cultivator?
Well, and I have to say, you have not done what people of my generation do, which is to say, your hair looks different. Do you know Mike Tyson? Yeah, I don't know if half your audience even knows what the joke is there, but there's a boxing promoter, or was a boxing promoter, named Donn King.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So, okay, see, you didn't know, so that's good.
Yeah, I've heard the name, I feel, but I didn't. Maybe I mistook it just when I saw your name. Maybe I was like, oh, this is who I've been hearing about for years.
Oh, my. So the idea of the confidence cultivator actually comes out of my research, and I don't mean direct research. I mean, reading other experts. You and I have talked about Bob Berg, who's an expert in all kinds of things, but especially in what I would call non-sleazy networking. There is a similar expert named Matthew Pollard who wrote The Introvert's Edge, and he also wrote a follow-up, The Introvert's Edge to Networking. It was his suggestion that you come up with some short moniker by which you can label yourself, just because it helps people to remember you. After all, we have trouble standing out in today's crowded field. That also led me to think about, well, what is it that I really do in all the different things that I've done in my career? I've worked in newspaper, I've worked in radio. As you mentioned in the intro, I'm a pastor. What do all these things have in common? And I realized that my life's mission, which is different from goals, different from a positioning statement, everything that I have done has been about helping people to figure out what their unique message would be and to communicate that effectively. And so at the root, I have found that by taking that approach, you can develop genuine confidence. Now, we have this thing, we hear about imposter syndrome. Okay. At the other end of that, there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. That is, people who think they're great when they're not. What these two have in common is it's an inaccurate view of themselves. And so what I have found is that when you have that sense of who you are, what matters to you, what your primary values are, and you're dedicated to communicating that, you forget about yourself. And when you do that, you start to develop genuine confidence. Wow. So that's where it all came together. And then trying to figure out, okay, how can I put that in 2 or 3 words? That's where the confidence cultivator came from.
What a story. I love how you said, when you forget about yourself is when you really begin to cultivate confidence. because when I first discovered personal development, I listened to a lot of Tony Robbins, and he's been a big role model for me. And he said in some speaking training I heard him give, he said, you don't determine the presentation. Your audience determines the presentation. It's not about
Absolutely.
you. It's about them. Right. And that was his
Absolutely.
number one principle. But I feel it's easier said than done, especially, speaking about that executive or leader who's going in front of a room about to deliver a very important message. And especially when their job might be on the line with all the competition or whatever it might be. And they're thinking, oh, what if I say, what if I stutter? What if I forget my place? Like when we have those thoughts and those fears, we are honed in on ourselves. And when
Absolutely.
ourselves, there is the absence of who we should be thinking about, which is those who we are communicating with.
Absolutely. I mean, first, I would say everything is easier said than done. That's the essence of it. But the one of the things I've done to kind of fit in with what you're talking about there, I call them bumper sticker reminders. We can have this deep understanding of the principles or whatever might be involved, but when you're under pressure, it's hard to remember. When you're up to your neck in alligators, it's hard to remember your objective was to drain the swamp. And so bumper sticker reminders. One for me is connection before content. It's not that the content doesn't matter. It's that without the connection, the content won't matter. Now, a lot of times people think of a speech as being a one way, I'm going to deliver it. You can hear this sometimes in people's voices. If you sense that if everybody in the room dropped dead, they would just keep saying the same thing. They're not connecting. That's not really communication. So even though a speech seems to be one way, it's very much a conversation, as you know, because I haven't seen you in person, but I've seen clips of you on stage. You establish that connection with an audience. It's almost a cliche, but it's true. I've heard it attributed to Maya Angelou multiple times along the lines that people will not remember what you said. They will not remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Now, again, that doesn't mean the content doesn't matter, but without the connection, the content won't matter. And so if we put all of our focus on the audience, preparing for that, of course, but not memorizing it, not worrying too much about the ums. I just had one just then. It was a natural conversational thing. Now, let's recognize that if you have a habitual vocalization of some sort, I had a client once whose word was basically. Basically, he said basically 2 or 3 times a paragraph. So basically, he's throwing it in there like punctuation. You see the problem. The problem there is that the pattern distracts from the message. So we don't worry about ums and you knows and all of those sort of things unless they start getting in the way of the connection. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's less about saying the word and more about the pattern of speech that may be getting in the way of what you're trying to convey.
Yes. Yes.
So connection, how is it? Because you said, I've seen you on a stage and you develop that connection, which I appreciate you saying that. How does one do that? And how were you able to see that in that clip that you might have seen that I was able to do that? What did you see and what must we do in order to develop that connection before the content?
Good question. If whether you've got 20 people or 2,000 people in front of you, one thing is to remember there's no such thing as an audience. 20 people out there, that's not an audience, that's 20 individuals. 2,000 people. Well, you can only see about the first 5 rows anyway. If you will pick out 4 or 5 people and look at them, genuinely make eye contact. You're not just making them feel like you're making eye contact. Really make the contact. Have a conversation with those folks and let everybody else listen in. It's going to feel like that you are connecting with each of those individuals. There's a real advantage in a way in what we're doing here right now. Everybody has a front row seat. Now, of course, there is a challenge. I don't know. you do a lot of podcasting, you do a lot of on stage work. Do you have a preference as to which is your favorite in terms of your experience as a speaker?
I love being in the presence of other human beings physically.
I would agree with you 100%. And part of that is because you, as the speaker, really have that sense of presence. So when you can feel that yourself, your body language and your voice naturally conveys that to the audience as a whole. Now, we can do that in this podcast setting also. And you probably do some episodes where it may be just you and a camera. I don't know about you. For me, that is the hardest situation because I don't have a sense of the person on the other side. And yet, if we do it right, they can have that feeling of personal connection. Everybody has a front row seat. The difficulty, and I've already noticed you are very good at this aspect of it. When you're on stage, you're making eye contact for two reasons. One is to give them the feeling of conversation. You know, I'm connecting with you. There may be 500 other people here, but I'm connecting with you. The other thing is you want to see what they're doing. You know, that old advice about if you're nervous getting on stage, pick out a spot on the wall and look at that instead. Worst advice ever. Because there's nothing worse than not knowing. And I guess we probably don't even need to say it, but we'll throw it out there. That advice about imagining them in their underwear absolutely does not work. It disconnects you from them.
True. It puts you in your head too.
However nervous you get looking at them, you need to know how they're responding so you can respond.
Yeah.
Now, here in this setting, we still have that same need, but we have to separate them. If I want to see how Brandon is responding to me, I have to look at Brandon on the screen. And now, as far as the people who are watching this are concerned, I'm looking below them. If I'm making the eye contact, which feels like to the folks listening here, watching here, that we are talking with them, I can't see what's happening with Brandon, or if we're in Zoom, the other people on the screen.
Yes.
So you have to consciously think about that. Because I'm consciously thinking about it, it's a little more likely to break the connection before content. All of this is a long way of saying I'm right there with you. I really prefer the stage because it's just much more natural that way.
Yes.
Yet you'll see people on stage that you can tell they're not looking at the audience. You know, they're looking at the back wall. They're looking around. They're looking at their notes. I guess because they think their nerves are coming from people looking at them. And that's not really where it comes from.
Yeah.
Am I digging too deep into this right now, Brandon?
I love it. I think it's very practical for people both in person, but also virtually, because you said many very important things, but a couple of things that really stood out is simply in order to make that connection, connect. And it sounds like really simple to say that, but like you said, 2,000 people or 20 people, you're still just seeing the first 5 rows of people. And in those first 5 rows, you're going to have a few really, really engaged people. One thing about Julie Cooley, who again introduced us, that I really love and respect is when you're in the presence of Julie is one of those attendees who truly gives you her full focus. And she's watching, she's listening, she's giving feedback, either good feedback or feedback that might tell you it's time to move on or to start talking about a different topic. So when you can find those people in the first 5 rows or one of the first 5 people who is giving you that feedback, really hone in on those people so you can tell, like you said, where you are in your presentation, because looking at that wall is not really going to help you. But also what you said that was really impactful was we nowadays do a lot of Zoom calls. And sometimes I see people, and for those watching, you'll see me do it right now. Right now, I'm looking at my computer screen and I see you, Don. You're on my computer screen. But I'm now disconnected from you because I'm not making eye contact with you. Even though I see you, it doesn't look like I'm looking at you, right? I invested in a teleprompter right here that shows me my screen again so I can look at you, but it just happens to be placed in front of my camera so that it's more of a natural and real conversation. Even though you're in Tennessee and I'm in upstate New York, it's like we're both together at the same time. So the point is invest in the ability to create that connection, even if that connection is being created virtually many states away or even countries away.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like we're in the same space, as you say. There are some techy solutions for that. You've mentioned one, the teleprompter. Most people would think of it as this is how I keep my script in front of me, but it can keep your screen in front of you. My wife bought me a camera that is actually on a little cord, so that the camera, instead of being up here at the top of my monitor like this one, drops down into the center of the screen.
Cool.
And that's kind of cool. I'm not using it simply because the quality of the camera, the video aspect, is not high quality enough.
Yes.
But it's a brilliant solution. I understand that I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company. It's coming to me. There it goes. NVIDIA. I have such a prodigious amount of brain. Sometimes it takes a while to sort them out. I'm kidding, by the way. I had a student who thought I was serious when I said that. NVIDIA is developing AI-assisted technology that will enable you to look at your screen, and the camera will take your actual eyes and move them so that you're appearing to the audience to be looking at the camera.
Wow.
So that's something that AI is bringing along for us. I would say one of the primary things that gets behind the tech is to recognize, we are having a conversation. Whether, it's a public speech, but we're having a conversation. The audience may not be literally talking, but they are communicating back to you. We started out, Brandon, with you talking about the primary communication skills. My contention is that the number one communication skill is listening. We've mentioned Bob Berg. One of the things that Bob and John David Mann, his co-author on the Go Giver series, one of their characters says you have to listen with the back of your neck. And I think that's a great image because it's talking about listening with your whole being, not just waiting for your turn to talk. So that listening skill just is really a key skill. Certainly before the speech, and again, I'll tell you, I don't know if you can tell or not, I am an introvert. Okay.
Me
People
too.
mistake me for an extrovert all the time. I am a social introvert. I enjoy people. But there's two things involved in that. One is, where do you get your energy? I have a good time at a party, but I need to be by myself to recharge. An extrovert will be charged up more leaving the party.
Yeah.
The other thing is, how do you form your thoughts? Introverts form their thoughts before speaking. Extroverts form their thoughts by speaking. And you know who you are. Okay. So honestly, for me, the hardest part of a speech is the before and the after. It's important for me to make that connection with the audience. So I always show up early. I hang around afterwards, shake hands, talk with people. But that is harder for me than the speech because I have thought about that. I've prepared that ahead of time. The reason this is not hard for me is because we're talking about things that I have worked on for over 40 years. So this is, how long did I prepare for this? Well, in a way, I didn't prepare at all. But in a way, I've been preparing for this talk for 40 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you feel what you feel before going on stage, I've even got my coffee cup here. It's not fear, it's energy. Okay. There would be something wrong with you if you weren't feeling that. It would mean that you didn't care about your audience. You didn't care about your topic, or maybe most dangerous, you don't care about yourself. So as Microsoft would say, that thing you're calling stage fright, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Okay, it just means you care. I have learned if I can get up on stage and not feel that really is a sign that I need to quit. I don't mean quit forever, but maybe quit that topic or I've stopped caring. I'll bet you, after how many episodes have you done now?
Almost 300.
Almost 300. You still feel that just before hitting the record button.
Always.
I'm betting.
Always.
Just means that you care. And so for those of you listening here, don't consider it to be that there's something wrong with you when you're feeling that. The author Susan Jeffers, who sadly passed away a few years ago, but she was a prolific speaker as well as writer. She wrote a book, the title of which was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Great title.
Great title, great advice. Everything in the book supported that. And that would be my message to you. Feel the fear and do it anyway. It means that you care about what you're doing, and that means that you have something to take out there. Now, we do have to kind of tweak that a little bit, come back to something you said a little earlier, Brandon. If you're feeling that because you're so focused on yourself, how are they going to think of me? Am I going to make an impression, yada, yada, yada? Then you may not be serving your audience as well. So keep the focus on the audience, but you don't have to get rid of that feeling before you can be effective. In fact, I would consider it to be something that helps you to be more effective because it's energy. Harness that sucker.
Wow. Such fantastic advice. So we've already got two of the most important communication skills. Number one being listening, and two being connecting with those you are having a conversation with. And we keep saying the word stage, guys, but like going back to what we talked about, sometimes the stage is when you're having a very important conversation with your leader or someone on your team who you're looking to help improve. The stage can be metaphorical as well as real, as if you're giving a presentation to many. But sometimes as a team trainer or a sales leader or whatever it is that you are, when you move up into that position of leadership, whether you're an introvert or not, you are likely going to be communicating with groups of people and certainly on a one-on-one basis with other people. And the quality of your communication will always result in the outcome, the quality of the outcome that you get. So my question for you, Donn, is you've spent 4 decades diving into this field. Why has communication become a very integral part of your mission as a pastor and a speaker and a writer and all the other things that you do that incorporate communication? Who are you doing this for that needs this the most, especially today?
That's a really good question for me, Brandon, because I am in a stage in my life where I am reevaluating. It's one of the things that led me to do the podcast that I'm doing now, which is the Alignment Show. Honestly, I'm doing that primarily as a passion project because I got interested in how people, especially during the pandemic, we heard about the Great Resignation. I prefer to think of it as the Great Reassessment or the Great Realignment, as people realize life is short. Don't want to spend your life doing something that doesn't matter to you. A lot of them quit. A lot of them recommitted to something. I'm going to have a guest coming up a little bit later on, Alexandra Watkins, who is a naming expert. I think she says this in her book, so it's okay for me to use this. She's the person who helped Wendy's come up with the name The Baconator.
Whoa.
Okay.
Great sandwich.
Yes, absolutely. So during the pandemic, like everybody else, she had to isolate and all that. And she thought, I've been doing this for 18 years. And she was kind of feeling, I think, a little burned out. But then she realized what she finds so rewarding in helping people with that. So she has narrowed her business, refocused it, but she's still doing the same thing. You see, it's not just the Great Resignation. So I found myself in that same situation. I've been at the college where I'm teaching now for 32 years. My mission hasn't changed. I'm finding that my enthusiasm for the classroom is not quite what it was. And so I am in a time of thinking, what's my core value? Which again is what led me to do the podcast that I'm doing, because it gives me a great excuse to have conversations with people I otherwise would not get to talk to. And I have been realizing my first love, even though I'm a speaker and I help people speak effectively, my first love always has been writing. So that's why I'm retracking into working on a book, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But I started working in a newspaper when I was 14 years old. And writing has formed part or at times all of my living ever since. I don't think that will make me as much money, so to speak, but I think it's where I can have some of the greatest impact.
Mm.
So it's only, I'll mention another book that's an old book. The name of it was Life 101. Drawing a blank on the authors right now, but it came out in the 1970s. And one of the things I remember them saying is differentiating missions and goals. Goals are set, missions are discovered.
Wow.
I'm not quite sure how that would fit with, because there's been a lot of stuff done since then on missions and values and the difference between mission and vision and all that sort of thing. All useful stuff. So I'm not saying this is the quintessential definition, but that's a useful perspective for me. Another related thing is that missions are understood in hindsight. So if you look at my resume, you know, I worked in, I sold books door to door. I worked at an employment agency. I worked at a radio station. The only one I can't really fit in there is I drove a delivery truck for a dry cleaners back in the day. But everything else, you look at it and I think, where's the thread here? It's only in hindsight that I realized for all of those things, I was working with people, even though I'm an introvert. You know, introversion does not mean shyness, by the way. Shyness is a fear of judgment. There is such a thing as a shy extrovert. Okay. People exhaust me, but I love them. I enjoy working with them. So what all of these things had in common was working with people, helping them to understand themselves, to find their core message, and to communicate that effectively. Even in my pastoral work, I'm more about empowering the congregation than I am about out there getting the message out myself. It still fits. Does that make sense?
Yes. I love, by the way, I know you just kind of threw it in there quickly, but I love what you said about how being shy is a fear of judgment,
Yes.
because that's something that's not frequent in my life, but especially when I'm in the room with people who are playing the game at a bigger level than me, you know, the room that I should be in most of the time, I am more shy. And I've always wondered, like, is this because I'm an introvert? And even looking back, I had been a shy person, especially at new jobs. I'd been the shy person at the company I'm with now for over 10 years. For the first year, I was a very shy person. And it's not because I didn't enjoy conversation with people, because I did, and I would open up with certain types of people. But have you ever been a shy person?
Oh, yeah.
And how do you move past that fear of judgment? Because I feel like that's a very important piece of this idea of communication.
Well, I have to honestly say part of it, Brandon, is I got old. Uh, you know what? When you are young, and young is relative, you know, I realize that, but just think about junior high kids, for example, some of the shyest people on earth. I think most of us know Maslow's hierarchy. Couldn't think of the name for there for just a second. You know, at the very basic level, we're concerned with survival, and then there is the let's see, I can't remember the next level, but the middle level, there's love and belongingness, and then there is the need to be looked up to, and at the peak is self-actualization.
Mm.
Well, if you have your survival needs not met, you don't really care what other people think about you. You know, that very basic level of survival. Okay. Wish I could remember what that second level is. I'm sure that our listeners can look that up really quick.
I'm going to share it real quick, because I like
Okay,
where
great.
you're
Yeah,
going with this.
pull that up. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll go on and mention that I think a lot of junior high kids, there we are. Okay, so safety needs. Yes. So if we
Yep.
don't feel safe, we don't care whether we're included in the group or not. I think by the time we reach junior high, we have maybe a basic feeling of safety, but we have a great need to be included. I don't know about you, Brandon. I did some pretty stupid stuff when I was in junior high and high school. just because that's what all the others were doing. I bet your mother used to say, if your friends were going to jump off a bridge, would you do it too? Yeah. At that point, yeah. Okay. When I got older, what was that fourth level? If you can pull that graphic back up again, if you still
Fourth
got
level.
it.
So it's physiological, which is survival, and then safety, love and belonging, and then esteem.
Esteem. There we are. The esteem needs that level is for, we have a need for other people to look at us and to think that we're smart, we know what we're doing, we're competent, whatever. Okay, I want you to notice an implication in that level. The need for other people to view me as competent. Okay, it's a step up from the group thing. So when I'm in junior high, maybe, and I'm not feeling included in the group, I'll do stupid stuff just to be included.
Yeah.
But when I feel those needs met somehow, then I'm more likely at that next level to want people to think I'm smart. The things that I did in junior high that I really don't want anybody to know about now.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's still focused on other people. There's a difference between me wanting people to view me as competent and viewing myself as competent. That's that self-actualization level. Okay, so bringing it back and what we were talking about was shyness. When you're in junior high, maybe young adulthood or whatever, we are really concerned with being included in the group. And what do other people think about us?
Yeah.
I made a smart aleck remark about I got old, but that really is part of it. And that can happen at any age. When you reach a point to where you're more concerned in how you feel about yourself than in what other people think of you.
Wow.
Now, this almost sounds contradictory because a little earlier we were talking about being focused on your audience as opposed to on yourself. But this is a different sort of focus that we're talking about here.
So how do you do that? How do you move into self-actualization from worrying about what others are thinking?
It does take time. It takes spending time with yourself. I think a big part of my personal journey has been spending time in meditation. I've been a meditator of some sort since 1979.
Wow.
Which, wow, it's amazing to me how long ago that was now. But that's not, it's not something that you do over a weekend. It is spending time with yourself, not avoiding yourself, which may sound kind of odd. I can remember as a kid, which keep in mind that would have been in the 1960s. We had 3 television channels back then. And I'm not just talking about being old here. When people, well, let me just tell the quick story here. I noticed that my mother would run the air conditioner even if it wasn't hot. She was just trying to get some noise going. And I was about 7 years old, I guess. And I said, Mom, why do you run that thing? And in a rare moment of transparent honesty, not putting my mom down, it's just she didn't reveal this kind of thing very much. She said, well, I'll tell you, when it's quiet, I get to thinking. And when I get to thinking, I get depressed. So I run something just to distract me. Now, I don't have to tell you, Brandon, or our listeners here, we've got these things. We've got these things that you and I are staring at right now. We've got cable TV. We've got streaming. There are so many distractions. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, all of humanity's problems stem from an inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
Wow.
And that's always been an impactful statement to me. I think most of us spend our time distracting ourselves so that we don't have to get uncomfortable. Now, I'm going to go just a little different direction here, Brandon. All of us have heard of the learning curve. May not realize the learning curve consists of 4 segments. Okay, now if I had graphics here, I would draw a curve and we can divide it up into 4 segments. The first segment is a comfortable place to be. That is unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. Do you remember being, I don't know, 10 years old and thinking it was a conspiracy that the adults wouldn't let you drive.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it looks simple. There's a wheel, there's a pedal, there's another pedal. How hard could it be? I've been playing video games with this for years.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what we don't know. That's a comfortable place to be. I learned on a stick shift when I learned to drive. Did you happen to, Brandon?
I didn't.
Learn
I
on-
actually never learned how to drive standard, but I did learn how to drive a motorcycle, which is very similar, I'm told.
Yes, trying to keep straight on which gears do I pull up and which do I push down. Yeah,
Yep.
similar kind of thing. I learned on a stick shift, and so I found out just exactly what I didn't know. You know, and so you have to consciously think about everything you do. Let's see, you step on this pedal, you move this stick up here, you give it a little gas, you let out on this pedal, you do like this, and then you start the car again because you just killed it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an uncomfortable place. This is called conscious incompetence. You're smacked in the face with what you don't know. And a lot of people quit right there because they think they should be better at it. The third stage is conscious competence. Now, in this one, I'm not killing the car. I'm driving the car, but everything I do, I have to consciously think about. Every time I shift gears, I have to consciously think about it. And I think this is the stage that got me on to talking about this right now, because we were talking about how do you get past that fear of judgment. This third stage is also uncomfortable. You've got some competence, but it's not as smooth, it's not as easy as you think that it should be. And so a lot of people quit right there. But if we push through that, we get to that fourth stage, which is unconscious competence. Now you can drive around the parking lot, steer with one hand, let down the window with the other, chew gum, talk on the cell phone all at the same time, because you don't have to consciously think about everything that you're doing. Yeah. And that's a comfortable stage. Now notice with this curve here, comfortable on each end, but the middle is uncomfortable. So just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're learning. But if you're learning something, it's almost certain you will be uncomfortable. As a culture, we're not really good with uncomfortable. So coming back to your question, how do you get past that fear of judgment? It's sort of like what Susan Jeffers said, feel the fear and do it anyway. Feel the discomfort and do it anyway.
Wow.
It's not just pushing through, but you have to recognize you got to go through the conscious incompetence and the conscious competence in order to get to the unconscious competence. That's where I don't worry about what the audience is thinking of me. I am focused, though, on connecting with the audience, on serving the audience.
Yes.
Coming right back to Bob Berg again, you know, if we keep our focus on the other person, then it takes the nerves out of me. It makes networking comfortable because I'm not focused on myself. In fact, pretty soon I forget about the fact that I'm networking. I know we're running short of time here, Brandon, so let me just throw this out there. Stop networking and just make friends. I know you know that. You know that at this point in your life. So, you know, for our listeners, stop networking. Just make friends. It's not about how do I get my elevator speech out there. Elevator speeches are almost useless because when you first connect with somebody, they don't care. And I got to give credit where credit's due. I learned that phraseology and that pacing from Bob Berg. He's absolutely right. They don't care. They're thinking about their own elevator speech.
Yes.
So put your focus on them. Bob has a thing he calls his 10 feel-good questions, but they're just conversation starters. So the first one that Bob recommends is, you know, of course, you find out what they did. And like, if I were just meeting you, you know, how it's a genuine curiosity question. How did you get started in the path that you're taking here? You asked me a similar question earlier. It's a natural question.
Yeah. It tells you a lot about someone. It does. It tells you a lot. And I think that what you said at the very beginning, to tie it back to what we're saying now, is what you learned from The Introvert's Edge, that book you mentioned, which I'm going to grab that book.
Yeah.
is create a small moniker. So rather than have a minute elevator pitch when someone says, so tell me about what you do, Don, and all of a sudden you just go into this rehearsed script and now they're tuned out and they want nothing to do with it. You can say, well, I help people to cultivate confidence. I'm the confidence cultivator. Then they're going to say, what's that? Tell me more. Where'd that come from? And then you just use that first question of how did you get started with this, right? Which gives you a great idea of that person's mission. It gives you a great idea of their why. And I love what you said, going back to the shy piece before we talk about the alignment show, because I want to ask you about that specifically. Is you said, well, one of the easiest ways of lessening that fear of judgment is getting older. And you're absolutely right. And it's because you've had more experience, right? And like you said, that can be relative. Old can be relative. 25-year-old who just happens to have put themselves in 100 uncomfortable situations could be at that point when it might take a normal person until they're 50 years old to be at that point, right? So just putting yourself in that discomfort more often, whether that's getting in front and offering to deliver the team training, or opting to have that uncomfortable conversation with someone because you know that you can deliver in an eloquent way, in a way that makes them feel as good as possible, but putting yourself in that situation to attend the networking event and do the things to make yourself uncomfortable, while at the same time going back to what you said and your great story with your mother and the air conditioner, of not being afraid to be with yourself more often. And that in itself will feel uncomfortable. And you might feel depressed at times. And being there anyways and staying in that feeling and being aware of that feeling, that in itself can help to evolve you to that next level of self-actualization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well put.
So let's talk about the alignment show. What is your mission with the alignment show? What can people expect when they tune into it? And where is it headed? Talk to me about the show.
So what we do with the alignment show is have conversations with people who have confronted the need to bring their lives into alignment with their values. Sometimes that's something that's happened recently. My guest tomorrow is going to be Val Burgess, who has spent 30 years keeping alive the stories of World War II POWs. Now, so that's not a recent change for her, but at the time that she shifted her life, she did make a big change, take a chance in order to bring her life into alignment. Some of the folks that I'm having conversations with, you know, they all have these origin stories. In a way, I think that's what the podcast is about. How did you do what you're doing? Michael O'Brien was on the show 4 weeks ago, I think it was. Michael was and continues to be a very successful marketing expert, but he had a head-on collision. He was riding a bicycle and a head-on collision with an SUV going 40 miles an hour. Almost died, and it led him to reevaluate how he was spending his life, where he was making an impact. He now goes into corporations and talks about meditation, mindfulness, that kind of thing. Not what you would think of as a traditional business topic.
Mm-hmm.
But he's making an impact, as he calls it, rippling goodness out into the world, because he was forced to think about what matters to me. So focusing it in again, every week we have a conversation with somebody about how did you find the courage or what led you to, what forced you maybe to confront what matters to me. You know, we talk about values and throw it around in a philosophical kind of way, but all in the world we mean by values is what matters to you, what's important to you. And sometimes we don't know. You know, we've been told what should be important to us. That's not the same thing. It takes some time. It takes some introspection to ask ourselves, what is, like one of my most important values is curiosity. You know, I just love digging into things that I don't already know about. Why? I really don't know. I mean, the book that I'm working on is called, working title, The Four Whys. or your 3-year-old why. The idea is to keep asking why the way a 3-year-old does.
Oh,
You got kids, Brandon. I mean, we don't know each other personally.
I have
We
one on
have
the
kids.
way. Yeah, next
Okay,
month
one on the
actually.
way. Okay. So I will say, as I say to people sometimes, just wait. But I mean, we've all been kids, and maybe you can remember at that age, you would ask a question and you'd get an answer, but it wasn't satisfying. There's even a technique in, I mean, we've all heard of Simon Sinek's thing about why before what, why before how. There's a management technique that's called the 5 whys that comes from Japan to ask, the question and then, well, why that, keep going. But you can still be fairly surface level, even with that 5th why.
Mm.
So I have guidelines like look for the so that. Well, I guess the first joke that we learned as kids is why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Okay, but nobody ever asked why did the chicken want to get to the other side? The hungry
True.
chicks over there, Colonel Sanders chasing him. We don't know. Look for the so that. What am I trying to accomplish? Look for the emotion. Here we are with emotion again. Okay, at the root of the word emotion is the word motion. Without emotion, there is no motion. We talk about being moved when we talk about a feeling, but we also talk about being moved when we're talking about action. The two connect to each other.
Yeah.
Look for the emotion. Tied into that, we've all heard the thing about people don't buy drills, they buy holes. That's the so that, okay? I would say take it further. Well, why do you want a hole? Well, I want to hang a picture. Why do you want to hang a picture? Oh, it's a picture of grandma. Well, why do you want to hang a picture of grandma? Well, grandma died a year or so back, and she was, the heart of our family. I remember, okay, here's another guideline. Look for the story. Because notice all the ones we've done so far, it just took a few words to answer the why.
Yeah.
But when I start telling a story, I am getting at really something that is core. So this is all tied in both with the upcoming book and what's behind the Alignment podcast as we dig into people's why. And how did you figure out that why?
That's beautiful. And what an eloquent way to describe it. You're a great storyteller, Don, and you've been telling stories for a while, and you've been communicating for a while and teaching others to communicate for a while. And I ask everyone who's listening, go check out the Alignment Show. There is a link in the description. And for those listening who don't want to go to the description, you can also find it at confidencecultivators.com. That's the best place you can find the show and reach out to Don. But I'll also include Don's LinkedIn profile in the description so that you can start a conversation there and connect with him there if you choose to do so. But Don, thank you so much for joining us, but not just joining us, but sharing some real practical communication tips. But I personally feel that this was a lot more practical life advice over anything, with a lot of sprinkles of communication, because what is life without great communication? That is life, right? But thank you so much, Don, for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and for telling so many great stories, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent. It's been an honor. And I will say the tagline on my website, which I'm redoing right now, by the way, but regardless, the tagline on my website says, life is communication, communication is life. You can't really separate the two. So great observation about life and communication.
That's true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope that you wrote down the top 3 communication skills that we talked about with Don today, as well as a ton of other amazing things. What I took away as the top 3 were, number 1 is listening. Number 2 is building that connection before espousing your content. And number 3 is to overcome that judgment, to overcome that shyness that I know I've personally experienced. Don's experienced it in his life. And if you're listening and have experienced that, then I hope that that segment was valuable for you as well. A lot of amazing stuff in this conversation with Don. Be sure to go to the description to check out his show, The Alignment Show, and you can find that at confidencecultivators.com. And if you took away even just one thing that you're going to take and use in your life or your business or your career or all the above, please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You're the reason this broadcast has grown the way it has over the past 3 years, or 2 years, I should say, with 300 episodes, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.